All right, I'll just be real quick with an introduction. My name is Bill Carver. I work at Readiness Partners, and I think I see a lot of faces here that I talked with earlier, and gave his spiel, so I won't go through all of them. But please check us out for a research-driven technical testing. A little bit different than most pen testing firms. And we have a risk and advisory practice, and that's what I have. But we're a pretty small company, only about 40 people, no investment money, no salespeople. We just survive by word of mouth, doing really good work. In my role, I get to work with our clients. I do a lot of IR tabletop exercises. So during those exercises, naturally, you just kind of like pick up on what people are doing good, what they're not doing good, what their challenges are. So recently somebody had asked me, just feeling like they weren't doing enough for their ransomware preparedness, just having that nagging feeling. Have an IR plan. I've done some tabletop exercises, we walked through some things, but he's like, I just don't feel like we're doing enough. I don't feel like I'm really ready. So he's like, I want you to help me be really ready. So I'm just going to walk through some things. And my goal is to just, if you can, walk out of here picking up like one thing, two things, where you say, oh, hey, I hadn't really thought about that, or that might be important. I probably need to check into that. Some of it's not going to be earth-shattering, information. But again, if you can just pick up a couple things where you're like, oh wow, that's a good idea. I probably need to go back to my organization and think about this. I'm not going to read all these stats for you. You can read them while I'm talking. But basically the premise is, as we probably all know, ransomware is not going anywhere, right? A slight decrease last year in the number of organizations that were impacted, but it's not going anywhere. And you can make the argument that although that number's a little bit lower, they'll probably go back up this year. But they're also the attackers are getting more effective with what they're doing, right? So, okay, maybe a little bit less number of organizations are impacted, but the attacks are more successful, the ransomware amounts are higher, and realistically, think about it, if you're 60%, almost 60% of companies that will or did last year have a ransomware incident, you're more likely to have one than not, right? Which kind of stinks, but that's the reality of it, is that it's just not going anywhere. It's getting worse, the effectiveness is getting worse. So some trends. These are the things that are like contributing to making it even worse, right? Can't have a presentation probably without AI. Can't have a conversation today without AI, it seems. But it's a very real thing that is impacting effectiveness of ransomware. So a couple things. It is helping attackers develop better phishing attempts, believe it or not. So using AI to develop the messages that you get that ultimately are going to give you ransomware. AI is helping to write those messages better, and the click-through rates are better using AI. So boom, AI is helping the bad guys do their job better. And then you have these access brokers. If you haven't heard that term, access brokers are just people who are gaining access into an environment. They gain a foothold, right? And then they don't do anything with it. They just hold on to it, and then they sell it to others so that they can use that access. So much like ransomware as a service, you've got people out there whose jobs, and they're making plenty of money, gain access into an environment, and then hold on to that access, and then sell it to someone else. So, oh, hey, you've got ransomware, I've got access. Let's put those things together and see what we've got. Fantastic. So access brokers are on the rise. That's an impact. Then you have, traditional ransomware was always, you got the message on your screen, your files have been locked, right? What am I going to do now? So that's bad, right? I can't use my data. That kind of stinks. But at least previously, that was kind of your only problem, right? How do I get my data unlocked? Maybe I can recover my backups, right? It's a challenge, but it's not the worst challenge. Now what you see almost all the time is data exfiltration. So your stuff is locked and they've taken copies of your data. So that just ratchets up the pressure. What do I do now? Okay, great, I can unlock my information, but what about the data that they have, right? So that's a huge problem. That's on the rise, along with data corruption, where now it's, we're gonna exfiltrate your data, we're gonna lock your data, and we've been in your environment long enough that we've corrupted some of your data. So all the backups that you think you're gonna rely on, those have been corrupted. They also may have malware, ransomware on them as well. So that's a challenge, right? And then ransomware as a service. I say this for last because this just blows my mind. So everybody's heard of ransomware as a service. There's a whole, dark web infrastructure of ransomware as a service that is like regular businesses like eBay and Amazon, where you can go, you can sign up, pick what kind of ransomware you want to use, what type of organizations do you want to target. There's support and chat, right? You pay, you can see your metrics and your trending. Bill's ransomware has infected these 50 companies. What would you like to do? Ransomware is absolutely amazing, but it's a full-fledged, viable business, right? And super easy to use. So now you don't you don't even have to know technology. You don't have to know how to write a single script. You can just go find a ransomware as a service site, sign up, do your evil deeds, make money, get paid in your cryptocurrency, and it has all the bells and whistles. Hey, my ransomware is not working right. Can you help me out? Why, certainly, sir. It's unbelievable. It does kind of blow my mind. All right, so I mentioned about being really ready. So the usual approach. So next few slides, I'm going to just talk through why the usual approach kind of is failing and what you may need to do better. And before I jump into those things, I'm just going to say it. If I'm saying the usual approach isn't good enough, and I'm saying something, I'm not picking on anybody. Like you might see something, say, oh yeah, we're doing that. And that's not good. I am not picking on anybody. There's a normal process and like maturation that goes on where, like anything else, right? We're going to start here, we're going to get better. So a lot of the things that I'm going to say aren't good enough and are kind of bad practices. That's not a personal attack on anybody or their company. It's all just very normal stuff, right? There's a reason that we've observed these things is because they are common, right? But again, not picking on anybody or their company if that's where you're at and that's what you've done. But just starting out with some things here. So some things that I see pretty commonly. Thinking that, I'm not sure how many direct InfoSec professionals we have here, but just InfoSec people tend to think of a lot of things as being an InfoSec problem when it's really much more than an InfoSec problem. So ransomware readiness, incident response preparedness is way bigger than information security, right? But again, a lot of us in InfoSec, we tend to be, I don't know, maybe a little bit introverted, maybe want to, like keep things a little bit close to the vest because we don't trust other people. Anybody like that? So it's a very common thing, right? So I can write an incident response plan. I can manage this whole thing. So you tend to keep it just like a little bit closer to the vest, and you don't reach out to all these other departments and groups that you see here. And it's a major mistake, because realistically, you may, as InfoSec, be kind of on the front lines when something happens, and that first hint of a ransomware attack happens, or any incident response. And you might be at that point, but then all of the key decisions that you're going to make thereafter, a lot of them are not going to be made by InfoSec, right? And part of it too is just it's hard. It's hard to talk to these other groups. In most organizations, it's difficult because they're going to ask you a lot of hard questions, right? They're just going to make things more difficult. You have to have meetings and conversations with these other groups, but it's super, super important to get them involved. And I see it all the time where, okay, you've got an incident response plan. Have you communicated this with HR and legal, marketing, corporate communications, crisis communications if you have it, right? All these other groups, they play an incredibly key role in the response process. So just a very common thing we see is, InfoSec kind of keeping everything tight, tight to the vest, not getting other groups engaged, and that's really a critical mistake. Because as hard as it is to talk, especially the network ops people, they're the worst, right? I'm kidding. I'm totally kidding. It's hard having the conversations, but these people in these other groups can really help you too, right? And it's super important. And it's super important to make sure that you're talking with them way, way, way before you have an incident, right? So it's one thing to say, okay, well, I know if something bad happens, we need to reach out to these groups, but the time to do it isn't during an incident, right? Reach out, be proactive, communicate with these groups, get them involved. Yes, it can be a pain, especially lawyers, any lawyer, just kidding. Okay. It can be difficult, but they really can help you tremendously. Okay, so our incident response planning and our team of people who may be incident responders. So this is another super common thing. This is probably why I made the point to say I'm not picking on anybody. Because the most common thing I see is, yeah, we've got an incident response plan. Like, hey, all right, great, that's a really good, first step. And then you look at the incident response plan, and somebody downloaded it from the interwebs, found some leading practice, downloaded it, and inserted their company name throughout, and then there's a table here to add, all of our contact information and stuff like that. So you put everybody's contact information in there. That's a terrible plan, right? It's terrible because it's not, to state the obvious, right? It's not going to really help you in an incident. You want your incident response plan. Yes, you should have one. Don't misinterpret that at all. But you should not have one that is completely generic, not tailored to your organization, and really isn't going to do you any good, in an actual incident or helping people understand how you're going to respond to an incident. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, basically, the better way to say it is, yes, have an incident response plan, but don't be Poindexter on day one where he puts on the glasses and is like,
step one of incident incident response plan is to call a number.
Right. Exactly. And the idea of not tailoring it, so a basic generic IR plan. So, and to be clear, I'm going to separate out procedures and other documentation that support the incident response plan. The incident response plan should be at this level. This should be something that all of those other groups that I had on the previous slide should review, they should be familiar with. It's going to describe how the organization in general is going to respond when you have an incident. But what it doesn't give you is it doesn't give you the step-by-step instructions someone needs to actually manage an incident. It's just, we're going to do these things. This is what we aspire to be. Incident response plans are great. Before you have a tabletop session, you should have a good plan, and you should share that with those stakeholders again that I referenced on the previous slide. They should understand just in general, okay, well, what is a security incident and how in general are we going to respond to it? But it doesn't get into any technical details, it doesn't give you step-by-step instructions, it's just a plan. So a plan is good, but also only as good as you make it. So I just really strongly encourage everyone, if you've done that, nothing wrong with downloading that leading practice framework, but spending the time to tailor it to your environment is absolutely key and critical. Don't do the, hey, boom, we're good, I got it, put our company name in there, we're all set, right? And then also, skill sets and training, I see this all the time too, where, just because somebody works in the InfoSec department does not mean that they're the best person or even a good person to respond to a security incident, right? Making sure that they have the right training. They should be incident handlers, send them to incident handling training. But also really important is that they have to have the right personality to be an incident responder. So think about working with all of those other groups and think about, has anybody been through like a really bad incident before, a security breach that they've had to manage on a Friday afternoon and it sucks? Yeah, okay.
Thanksgiving long weekend.
Right.
User crunch.
Man, and if you've been through a bad one, man, the pressure is high. in bullets, depending on your size of your organization and complexity and all that stuff. But the pressure is really high. People are freaking out a little bit, potentially, right? And it does typically happen on a Friday afternoon. I was kind of only kidding, but it seems like it's always a Friday afternoon. But the person who's managing it from the InfoSec side, working with those other stakeholders, yes, they have to have great technical aptitude, but they also have to be able to manage the pressure, manage the stress, communicate with other people, right? It's super, super critical. I've met a lot of people who've been tagged with incident responder status or roles that are in no way really qualified to do it, right? I'm just like, that person is going to be a disaster if there's an incident. So making sure that not only they have the technical aptitude, but they have the business acumen as well to be able to manage an incident, communicate with people, that is super important. Think about what it would do to your incident response process during that super stressful time. And you've got somebody running point for InfoSec who, yeah, might be the most technically awesome resource that you have on the team, but just not capable of coordination, of pulling everything together, managing things as they need to be. And then also your plan, this is super common to forget for some reason, is let's say you're some type of service provider. What is my incident, my ransomware attack, how is that going to affect all of the people that are reliant on me for business? So who do I need to communicate with? When do I need to communicate with them? Missing third parties, business partners, vendors, contractors, whatever you want to call them, your external partners, people that are either reliant on you for a service or you share data with or they share data with you, that all falls into this bucket. And it's amazing how often they're just not included in the plan, not even included in the thought process. And just all the, you can imagine, right? All the bad things that could happen from that. You could have issues with, legal liability because you didn't provide a service because you were down with ransomware. You could have reputational risk because you weren't able to provide the service, things like that. So very key, very important is to make sure you're including those third parties in your incident response plan. And just to mention it too, there's a panel at 4:30. Sorry, I should have mentioned this at the beginning. So I am gonna try to be done by around then in case folks want to go see that. So I'm gonna try to be done. So, okay, so here's another one. When we think about prevention and detection, so we've got endpoint detection and response, right? We've got the best EDR solution. We've got CrowdStrike, we've got SentinelOne, whatever. We're awesome. We bought the best product. We bought professional services. They came in, they helped us fine tune it, implement it, everything's awesome. Usually not really, right? Why I say that is one of the things that we do at Readiness is we test EDR implementations. And we're always successful at bypassing EDR implementations. Part of the reason for that is just everybody's environment is different. Everybody's standard build is just a little bit different, right? Everybody's infrastructure is a little bit different. Certainly they're going to catch, 98, 99% of the stuff, and that's great. But what's super important that not a lot of people do is leverage an outside firm. Doesn't have to be a Readiness, could be, but leverage an outside firm to test your EDR. Don't use the vendor for their professional services and implementation, but to actually sit down, with a laptop with your standard config on it and your EDR on it. Have somebody actually test that, right? We're sending malicious payloads or doing something bad. Is it catching it? Is it not catching it? Almost every time I've seen that done, there's problems with the EDR. Some of it's easily fixable, some of it's not, but just thinking that you've purchased it, you've implemented it, you've leveraged the vendor to help, implement it as properly as possible, do more. Do the next step, test your EDR. And then secondarily is that EDR is just part of your defense in depth, strategy, right? It's not the only thing you have. You probably have other things that are helping protect you. A common mistake is just not to consider and do a strategy and a roadmap, like a technology tools roadmap, where you say, here's all the wonderful products we have. Because InfoSec people, the other thing, we like to buy tools. Love buying a tool vendor because they got a shiny new widget, silver bullet. Yeah, let's buy it. We like to buy a lot of tools. So A big thing is, okay, it's great to have the tools, but do you have a clear picture of what the coverage is of all the different tools, where the overlapping coverage is? Do we want overlapping coverage? If you can't visually look at that, that's something that you definitely want to consider. Call it, a product tools strategy roadmap. But also, in addition to what are the capabilities of the tools, and do we have all of the things covered that we want to have covered? All the different portions of our environment and all the different layers of our environment. Not only do we have it covered, so that's a good thing, but then also really important is who's doing what with the data, right? Super common to see, we've got a tool, hey, awesome, you got it. Yeah, it generates, tons of logs and it's all super useful information, and yeah, well, who looks at it, communicates to other people, and actually makes it operational? Big mistake is just having all of that data, not knowing who owns it or who should do something with it. Nothing worse than having all that information and not acting on it. Okay, and then data backups. So I tell a lot of people who feel really strongly that their ransomware readiness strategy really begins and ends with data backups. We're good. We got data backups. We test them. We not only test that they're running and working properly as far as the actual function of doing the backup, but we test them. If you're on the higher end of the maturity scale, you're actually testing the backups, doing restores from backup, things like that. It's important, so don't take any of the things I'm going to say next to say that data backups are not important. They're certainly very important, but it is not a sole strategy for ransomware readiness to just say, hey, if we get hit with ransomware, we're just going to restore from backup, right? I get the sense that most people in a room know that, like, when somebody says that we'll just restore from backups, it's not that easy. It's never that easy. And it can be super, super time consuming to restore from backups, right? But then think about some of the trends that I mentioned before. So you're going to restore from backups, and then you realize that, oh, well, the attackers have compromised my backup data. Well, that's a problem, right? Or you've got your backups, and let's say that maybe you haven't run them as frequently as you need to, so now your data is going to be inaccurate, can't bring it back. It's not a sole strategy. It should be part of your strategy. It definitely shouldn't be the thing that you're hanging your hat on. So the thing we see missing most often, your regular testing of your backup data, not just whether or not it's functioning correctly or not. But also it doesn't solve, when I say it's not a sole strategy, it doesn't solve the data exfiltration problem. So you might be able to recover from backups in a long period of time, but it doesn't help because the attackers have also exfiltrated your data. So, okay, how do we solve for that challenge, right? And then what was the other piece? Oh, about the data corruption piece and installing malware and the same ransomware into your backup environments. So a lot of times the attackers have been there for quite a period of time. They're not just going to break in, launch ransomware, and that's that. They're going to hang out in the environment for a while before they launch ransomware. Before they do that, they are attacking the backups. I don't recall exactly, but I think there was some statistics on the first slide I had about the prevalence of, based on the number of ransomware incidents. I think it was in the 70s or 80% of those successful attacks also targeted backups. So they know that that's what people are relying on for a strategy. And again, it's absolutely important. We absolutely want to do it, but it is definitely not a sole strategy. How confident would you be, raise your hands, how confident would you be if you had a massive ransomware attack tomorrow and you collectively made the decision to just recover from backups? We're just going to recover from backups. Raise hands for who would be like 99% confident that would go well. Yeah, okay, well, not nobody. Okay, I thought maybe there'd be one brave soul to say, yeah, we're super good. And you might be, for sure, that could definitely happen. But that just goes to show that it's not a great strategy, again, part of your strategy. And then really, with cyber insurance and incident response retainers, this is some really fun stuff. So tons of common mistakes that we see here. This actually, these next two slides to me probably play most into the things that are really forgotten most and are really bad. But when you think about your insurance, I talked with a lot of companies and done tabletops where they said, you know, hey, we've got insurance, you know, we're good. Okay, well, that's great, you got insurance. How much insurance do you have? They generally know the number. Okay, we've got 5 million, we've got 10 million. Okay, do you know how that breaks out into the different areas that they will reimburse you for? So you may get a certain amount of money that covers your IT recovery, you know, asset recovery, things like that, physical things. You may have a certain amount of that money that's available for notifying customers, sending out notifications, doing things like that, other communication. But in most cases, people don't really know what that breakdown looks like. But far, far worse than that is not knowing, number one, exactly how to engage with your insurer when you do have an incident. So some of them may require you to notify them immediately, like whatever course of action you're going to take, first thing you have to do is notify your insurance provider. Okay, maybe you have an incident response retainer. So you have a firm that you like to work with. You've got an incident response company that's going to parachute in maybe when you have an incident and they're going to help you. A very, very common thing is to have an incident response retainer. So a couple things to think about there and things that I see done incorrectly a lot is making sure that whoever you may want to use if you have an IR retainer, make sure that they are on your insurer's approved list. Because you may have something in your insurance that says you may only use incident response folks from these companies. So your company that you want to use may not even be on the list. Might not be hard to get them on the list, but the last thing you want to do is have, okay, I got a retainer, I'm going to use this company. And if you do that, you could possibly void your insurance because you didn't use a company that was on, you know, your insurance requirements. Also, with your incident response firms, they like to come in when they're selling you a retainer, tell you how great they are, and you sign up and you buy, I don't know, you buy 500 hours of incident response retainer. Be really, really sure to check what the SLAs are on retainers. So they might just be giving a presentation again about how wonderful they are, and you know, we can have somebody respond within 12 hours. We can, but is that in your retainer, right? So it's just really important to make sure that your retainer meets what you think your needs are for response time. So great to have a retainer, just make sure it's got those details in there, but making sure that whomever you want to use is on your approved list for the insurers. I mean, just to say it out loud, they don't really want to pay you, right? That's the whole insurance model, right? Let's not pay, just like if you bang up your car and they try to give you a hard time about paying. It's the same thing. So they're going to look for ways not to pay you. Sorry if there's any cyber insurance folks in here, I'm not trying to be mean. Make sure too, if there's criteria for reimbursement, like I mentioned, that phone call that you might have to make to your insurance provider, that might be something. They might have other steps in there that you have to take in order to receive reimbursement. So just double, triple, quadruple check those things just to make sure you're on board. They oftentimes will have, so you may have your insurance and retainer capabilities, like IR response capabilities through your insurer. If so, make sure you got a really good understanding of what their process is. They might have a 1-800 number that you have to call. Okay, well, what's the SLA for how quickly they have to respond if I'm relying on insurance? All of those details, they'll be in your, if you have a policy, that information will be in there, so make sure that you double check that. And I talked about coverage a little bit. So the big thing, again, read your insurance. Make sure that if you have your own IR incident response provider, that they are either on their list or they can be put on their list, or that you're in some other way allowed to use them. Make sure about what those response times are and SLAs, what coverage you have in different areas. You'll probably, if you have a big enough insurance coverage amount, you may have reinsurers. So you've got, main insurer covers this amount of money, but then you've got other insurance providers, reinsurers that are part of it. Understand how all that works. And also really super important is making sure that when it comes to paying a ransom, and I'm going to jump into this in the last slide, make sure that when it comes to paying a ransom, understand what language is in your insurance for that as well. Will they help you facilitate that? So if your organization has made a decision that, you know what, if it's bad enough, you know, I'm a healthcare provider, if I get ransomware and I can't provide critical care, that's a problem, right? So I'm gonna pay a ransom. Okay, I'm just gonna make that decision. I'm gonna pay it. Like I have patient safety issues, I'm gonna pay it. Don't judge me, that's just my business. That's what I'm gonna do. Making sure that in your policy, if it's not there, that you have a plan for how would you actually do that? How would you actually pay a ransom? I had a customer one time ask me, they were determined that they would pay a ransom and that they would do it themselves. They didn't have any of that capability built within their insurance policy where they would help them facilitate that and negotiate with attackers and things like that. So they were determined, no, we're going to pay it. Boy, I'm blowing past 4:30 already. Okay, I'll be quick. Okay, so they were determined that they were going to do it themselves. So I explained to them, I said, okay, so here's what that's going to require. Well in advance, you're going to have to set yourself up some cryptocurrency wallets. That's going to take maybe a week or so. Then you're going to have to take organizational money and put it into cryptocurrency so that you can pay an attacker when this happens. And then how are you actually going to pay? You know, you're sitting there and you're going to just use your, you know, regular work laptop to go pay ransomware attackers. Are you going to negotiate with the attackers? Paying it yourself, I feel like is just not a great idea. So just make sure that it's built into your insurance or your IR retainers, that you've got people to help you negotiate and pay, because it's not something that you're going to be able to adequately do if you just try to pick up and do it for the first time ever when you're in that pressure-packed situation that we were talking about before. Okay, so try to be quick through this last one here, but really, really important. This is the last thing, maybe the most important thing that I see within organizations is they just don't ask the right questions and they don't ask the hard questions. Going back to, you know, some people maybe being a little bit introverted, wanting to keep things close to the vest, and these are hard questions, so they don't often get asked. But quick show of hands, within your organization, do you know definitively whether you would pay a ransom or not if you got attacked? Definitively, no? Okay, cool. No? Okay, definitively no. Okay. So you're not sure, right? So that's, did a tabletop maybe about a month ago with the company. Started out, had all the right people there, those stakeholders that we mentioned early on, they were all there. And one of the first things we kind of threw out was about paying a ransom. And every one of them without hesitation was like, oh God, no chance we'd ever pay a ransom. No, we're not doing that. No way whatsoever. By the end of the tabletop exercise, just naturally occurred through a discussion. We're like, I don't know, Bob, would we pay a ransom? Maybe we would. What if it impacted this? Or what if it was only this amount that they were asking for, right? So talk about that well in advance. Get those decisions out in the open. I don't see it very often, but I really strongly recommend a decision matrix of some kind. So if the ransomware happens and these things happen, it is, you know, this much data affected, or these areas that are affected, or the ransom is this much, whatever it might be, you've got some type of decision matrix. But that's definitely not an InfoSec question to answer, for sure. That's not up to us. That's definitely up to other folks in the organization, generally at much higher levels. Let them decide. And whatever that decision is, I'm okay with it from an InfoSec perspective. I tell you about risk and you make your own decisions. That's fine. But just really get it ahead of it and know whether you would pay it or not. Has it been discussed? Has it been documented? That's super important. And then we talked about it a little bit, but how would you pay a ransom? So if you decide that you would pay a ransom, really think about, okay, how would we execute this when minutes, seconds and minutes are going to really matter, and we've got this, this ransomware attack. So really have that decided up front. That's super critical. And would anything change if you had, data exfiltration involved, data corruption involved? Would any of that change your decision? Would you consider using publicly available decryption keys? I've seen this all over the map. Some people are like dead set against it, like no chance I'm going to trust some quote unquote publicly available decryption key. Other people are like, yeah, I'd give it a shot if it helps us avoid paying the ransom. So just understanding all these things up front, they're super tough questions. I understand why people don't like to talk about it because it's uncomfortable. Because when we talk about these things, we're all thinking about, my God, what would happen if we had ransomware? And I'm not going to ask anybody if they've had ransomware. I'm just going to guess based on a 60% number, and I look across the room, I guess at least a few of you have had a ransomware incident. But I get why people don't want to talk about these things, but they are ask the hard questions of the right people. Get in a room, do it in an incident response, tabletop session. That's a good time to do it. Get people talking about it. So, all right. Well, with that, I'm sorry I blew past 4:30 a little bit, so I apologize if you wanted to go listen to the panel. But that's all I have. Anybody have any questions? Yeah.
I have two. The first one is quick, and the second one might be slower. But if anybody else wants to leave, you don't have to. But the first one is, with respect to paying the ransom, how many of your customers have you noticed that the exfiltrated data is not really deleted?
So we don't, at Attributes, we do not provide incident response services. So the information I have is from incident response tabletop exercises, planning developments, things of that nature. I think if people don't have any, you can't have any real great level of assurance that you pay the ransom, but your only level of assurance is that in an odd way I mentioned the kind of the dark web, ransomware as a service. There is a code between attackers and the whole ransomware subculture where one attacker can make everybody look bad, right? So if I want to keep getting paid, right, as all the other attackers do, if I don't hold my, crazy as it sounds, if I don't uphold my word, right, that's really bad. Because then people are saying, well, that's going to get out, and that's going to happen again. And then people are going to say, well, I'm not going to pay because you might unlock my data, but you're not going to delete it, or if you delete it, maybe you're actually hiding a bunch of it. So I think the best you can do is rely on the code of honor of the attackers in this case and hope that they delete your exfiltrated data. Yeah.
So then my second comment about that is that with respect to backups, if the first thing they're going after is backups, how are you backing up terabytes or more of data? And not only that, but how long does it take to recover?
It takes a super long time. I mean,
Yeah.
it takes a long time. That's why I would say it's never as easy as we think it is, which makes me cringe when people say, data backups. That's my strategy because it's just not super effective. Nobody raises their hand. I don't think not a single person. When I asked, would you have confidence that you could pull it off reasonably quickly, and would your data be accurate, and how would you validate that it's accurate? It's tough. And certainly, when it comes to your backup strategy, you want something that's like highly redundant, something that is off the network from your standard, all of your standard systems, and something that is immutable, right? So you want all of those things, but even if you have that, it's just, I think of all the large, mid to large organizations, how difficult it would be to actually think about how hard it is for most companies to do like a real disaster recovery test, where you're actually, replicating, an incident and recovering from actual backups. And that's just like a small subset of your organization that you typically do that against, a subset of applications and stuff. That's super hard to do by itself. I can't even imagine everything or almost everything is down. We're just gonna, yeah. I'll just say I'm definitely in a lot of cases, I'm in the pay the ransom category. I understand the ethics of it all, and understand too that some companies are legally prevented from paying ransom. So certain governments and state governments have made it illegal to pay a ransom. But I'm generally if it's going to massively impact your business, and you're providing a service, you're providing care, you're providing something really critical, or it's going to just cost you a boatload of revenue every day that you're not available, like the pipeline incident, like how much money that costs them every day. I get we probably should pay the ransom, right? I mean, I understand, because to me, that's better than, I'm gonna just say, forget it, we're gonna wipe everything, and we're gonna restore from backups. I just really feel like that's probably not gonna happen, or at least very well. So,
Is negotiation a waste of time?
no, not at all.
No?
No, I don't think so. By the professionals, not by me.
Yeah.
But no, there are statistics that show that oftentimes negotiation can reduce the payment amount. I think the base payment request is around $2 million. And then, in many cases, negotiators, easy for me to say, are able to reduce that amount by sometimes up to like 40 or 50%. So it is definitely worth a shot. If you've got a good insurance provider, they will help with a lot of this. You just have to know exactly how to engage them and exactly when to engage them and things like that. But I definitely think, and that's part of why I think it's really foolish to ever think that you're going to just do it yourself. You're certainly not going to negotiate, so that hurts right out of the bat. You're not going to give yourself a chance to reduce the dollar amount. But then also the whole idea of how would you actually make, the process of making a cryptocurrency payment to an attacker. Good luck. I mean, you could.
I guess one thing that we were advised as well, like in dealing with like an incident, just like speaking to outside counsel, and like what they had advised us was like, there's actually a list, like government list in the United States, of organizations that you cannot pay because they're affiliated with like terrorist organizations and stuff too. So if you just make the decision, oh, we'll pay it and do it, but you don't consult that, like you can then have legal implications from the government for paying out to an organization.
And how many folks do you think have done that thoughtful analysis as part of their ransomware?
Right, yeah. Right. We went through a tabletop exercise and was told
That's
this
awesome.
by,
Ransomware not free.
Actually, I think,
I echo the same thing. You have to be careful if you're doing any business with the government and things like that, because you don't want to find out that now your organization can no longer do business with the U.S. government because your organization funded a terrorist group. And I strongly advise anybody that if you've decided that you're going to go down it, reach out to a broker. I feel both ways though. The brokers know the players out there, and they're able to negotiate. Now, the people that are coming in that are going to issue the ransom, they've been in on your system. They know how much your company's worth. They know how much your cyber insurance is. Your cyber insurance carrier is most likely going to advise you to pay because it's cheaper. But the broker will be able to tell you whether or not, how much you can basically trust them, right? You could pay them and they could just ghost you and you don't get the keys, and now you've just wasted $1 million.
was it somebody over here had a question?
I was going to add on to the earlier point. Just the question about the restore time. And you mentioned the pipeline. So the Coleman pipeline a few years ago, they were actually restoring a good backup and found out it was taking too long. So then they made a decision to be quicker to pay down and restore from the ransom or with the ransom being credit. So you got to know your recovery time objectives and test your systems to know, are we meeting the business objectives with our capabilities? So,
And
like you said, it's hard to do on our systems. We have to know what that is.
yeah, and no, you make a good point too, because even if you do, you do some great business impact analysis work, and you know what all, like you have your set of applications, and you know exactly what your recovery time objectives are, and all that good stuff. You tend to do those BIAs in a vacuum. You're looking at that application, say, okay, great, we can bring that up in 12 hours or 10 or whatever the program is. You spread it out now, and it's a massive incident, and all the applications are down, and all of them need to be recovered. You're never meeting those RTOs, right? I mean,
It's important to have different business stakeholders, and because their operations are down, they can provide all the fuel they want. Their accounting is down, they couldn't collect money from us. They said, we're not doing business, we can't collect money. So you could have looked at operations all you wanted and said, we'll make sure we have availability.
But it doesn't matter if you're not able to execute, right? Right? Yep. Question?
So, first question, just going back to running tabletop exercises and how you handle that. I've just started doing that recently with my company, and I've sort of found the teams I talk with are either like, we're doing this for the first time, or we've done this a million times and just find it really boring. How do you keep them engaging, and like, how do you draw people in?
I mean, so you're right in that line of thinking. I would say if you as a facilitator are talking more than the people, then the tabletop's not going really good. Part of it is just asking questions. So a lot of times when you do it, here's my scenario, and then you've got your injects, so you're gonna ratchet up the intensity of your incident response scenario. It's really easy to forget to ask questions and make people answer questions and say, okay, well, what do you think, right? So some people might want to be quiet. No, you just ask it directly, like, what do you think? But changing up the scenarios, certainly does help. You're probably doing that, but I mean, changing up the scenarios really helps. So, if you did ransomware, then you could do something else and change it up, you know what I mean, and change it up, or even you could have different ways that the whatever the malware was introduced into the environment. But I find just telling people right out of the gate that it's only going to be as good as much as you're talking and I'm not talking. Asking them direct questions, and if they don't answer questions, like for people who just don't want to talk, I just ask them directly. So, Bob, what's your take on this? But building a lot of questions, and they're not just statements like this happened, that happened, then this happened, then that happened. I like to, with the inject, say, okay, here's something that happened. The help desk got a weird call at this time, and then somebody else called and said they got this, had this message on their screen, and something. Okay. Then when I do that, I'll do the inject about what just happened. Then the next thing I do is questions. So I don't get too far past that. It's inject, like this thing happened at this time, and then Bob, what would you do at this point in time? Who would you call? Would you call legal yet? Would you call this person yet? Would you call law enforcement? Right. So building tons of questions in and just being kind of obnoxious and asking people, making them feel uncomfortable, and also being comfortable with dead silence too for a minute. Eventually somebody will probably speak up and say something, right? So if there's a question out there and they know the answer and they're just kind of sitting there, let them sit there for a minute. Eventually somebody will say something. So, all right, I nailed it, 4:30 right on the dot. Technically, to be fair, I am perfectly within my regularly allotted time. I was trying to get done. I apologize if you really want to see the panel and you were being polite and didn't run out on me in the middle, but that's awesome, so thank you. And if anybody did come in late, did get a challenge coin from Readiness, let me know. And certainly check out our website. Everybody I talked to earlier knows I mentioned this. But read our blogs, our hackers, not just lip service. They are truly the best and brightest in the world. We only have about 25 or 30 of them. And they are absolutely amazing. Check out the blogs. They will absolutely blow your mind. It's not like some cruddy blogs from like 5 years ago that aren't relevant anymore. We're usually releasing one about once a month or so they're really good. Some awesome ransomware blogs out there by Bill Kerber. Check those out. But yeah, check our site out. And hopefully someday in the future, maybe our paths will cross and we'll be working with the Readiness. That'd be great. So thanks a bunch for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.